Andrew, are you a royalist?
No, in a word.
No,
I'm not.
filthy peasant.
In so many ways, it's as though they are highly respected and loved zoo animals.
Despite that, the show does a good job of respecting these people. They're people, they're not characters. Queen Elizabeth was kind of the touchstone of reality and proper action and what the West stands for.
Yeah, sort of the figurehead of the West.
They raised the question in the show, because I think the question was being raised in the public, which was, is the royal family an asset or a burden?
Hi, welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Today, we're talking about something very relevant and not at all dating back 1,000 years. We're talking about The Crown, the TV show on Netflix, and of course, the British monarchy.
Indeed.
Season 6 of The Crown just came out in December, so that's kind of going to be our focus, but we'll talk about all of it. So, first and foremost, we weren't sure when we were going to ask this, but I'm going to ask this straight off the bat because I think it's fun.
All right.
Andrew, are you a royalist?
No, in a word.
No,
I'm not.
filthy peasant.
I will say, interestingly enough, though, I do have family who, they wouldn't say they're royalists, but are rather obsessed
Right.
with all of the, I guess you could say, the story or the, headlines about the monarchy, the British monarchy.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between being a royalist in England and a royalist in America. A royalist in America just kind of means you like watching the kings and queens do stuff.
Yeah, it's a spectator sport.
It's like a royal file or something.
Yeah, right. So, Thomas, what about you? Are you a royalist?
I would say no and yes.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, in regards to the English monarchy or the British monarchy, no, I'm not a royalist.
Okay, all right.
But Jesus is king.
Yes.
And so, in that sense, yes, I am a royalist.
You stole my snarky answers.
So,
Good answer.
Just like in Sunday school, the correct answer to everything is always Jesus.
Yes.
so yeah, I think it's easy to say that you enjoy kind of the drama surrounding the royal family right now because they don't have any power over us.
You're right.
So it's just kind of like entertainment and gossip fodder.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, furthermore, it's a key part of our history for many of us. Many Americans came and have a lineage from that island.
I mean, my contention is the history of America before 1607 is just the history of England. If you disagree with that, that's fine. You can be wrong.
So are you saying that up until 1776, we can blame slavery on the British?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Unfortunately, we also have to give them credit for ending slavery, though, because they're the ones who ended the Atlantic slave trade.
The Atlantic slave trade.
But also
we had
worldwide, they did
we
more
had
than
to fight
anyone
that
else.
war that
Right, to
finally
end
ended
it
over
here in America.
Yeah.
But slavery would not have ended without the British.
We ended it faster than they did, though, from the time that we started it.
We also ended it more bloodily.
More bloody, I
Yes.
think. Yeah.
This is true.
Yeah. I'd take their method any day.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, so to answer my own question, I think in the sense of do I enjoy watching the British monarchy? Yes. In that sense, I guess I'm a royalist. I do think there are a lot worse political systems than monarchy.
Sure.
Like communism or monarchy, I choose monarchy 100 times out of 100.
Yeah.
So, if I can't be capitalist, I guess I'd be a monarchist.
Yeah, if you can't be capitalist
Right.
and you can't have a democratic republic, then sure.
Yeah.
I mean, but you can have a capitalist system. I mean, that's
Right. Yeah, I used the wrong term because England is capitalistic.
Right.
If I can't be an American, then I'd be a monarchist.
If you can't be like a democratic republic.
Well, I would take monarchy over living under Trudeau.
See what you did there?
True. I don't know what Canada is right now.
Yeah.
Our benevolent tyranny of the North.
Yeah, it's a
For
baby
America's
dictatorship.
hat.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you don't have a really strong constitution, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's what happens when you never had to fight for your right to exist.
Yeah, that's why we said, hey, you're going to let us go free and fought for it. And then Canada just was like,
Hey, can we be free?
can we be free now? It's like, yeah, it's been enough time.
Sure, whatever. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
All right, but that's
we,
pretty off
We
topic.
just offended a bunch of Canadians, I'm sure.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Some of you Canadians are good people.
Some of
That's
you
a lot
are.
of
I don't
them.
have anything against the Canadians. I have a lot of things against the Canadian government.
I think a lot of Canadians have a lot of things against the
Yeah,
Canadian
that's
government.
Right. And if you allow yourself to be to become unarmed at the behest of the government, then I have a low-level disdain for you.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Anyhow, going back to The Crown. So the season that just came out is season 6, which opens with the last weeks of Princess Diana's life. So here's a question. When she died in 97, I was 3 years old. So I vaguely remember hearing that something had happened, and that's it. Like
At 3 years old, you
not specifically, but like I knew by 4 or 5 that there had been a princess who had died recently. You know, so like I kind of knew about it as it was happening.
Your parents
but not-
must be.
Oh, my mom.
royalists.
My mom loved Princess Di.
So
Specifically,
did
Princess
you
Di.
ever ask your mom if she'd been alive in 1776? Would she have been a patriot or?
I think there's a big difference between George III, who went insane, and Princess Diana, who was, as the TV show calls her, the most beautiful woman on the planet.
Yeah.
Just-
and the princess of the people.
And, you know, she in some ways emulated Jesus in incredible ways when she specifically touching the AIDS victims, which was a big deal when she did that. So I think she's a person it makes sense to look up to, but she's not King George III.
No, but so you obviously your mom must have obviously talked about her enough.
Yeah,
that you-
like my mom, she says she cried when she found out and was very, very upset. So I think that's why I have some vague recollection that something happened.
I witnessed my mom crying about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and 97, I was about 7, 8 years old. Yeah, and I remember seeing all the TV stuff. You know, it was on the news for like a week.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thomas, how old were you?
I was in college. 97. So I'd have been about 20. But yeah, I was not a royalist and I really didn't care. And it was just kind of interesting to see all the TV coverage and everyone like whining about how the monarchy didn't seem to care because they didn't do anything.
I mean, what are you supposed to do when someone dies in a car accident? Like, you can't undo that.
Well, it was a big event around the world, and so I remember it, but it wasn't like 9/11 or anything. I was just like, yeah, it's sad somebody died. I know. I mean, I remember the drama surrounding the royal family at that point with the whole breakup of the marriage and stuff like that. So I knew of it in culture, but I was also as an American and going about my own life and they're
Busy with other stuff.
they were over there in England, and I said, that's fine. It's not my king. It's not my princess.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
Yeah, I did.
I was not emotionally invested in it at all.
Okay. All right. So Thomas wants to destroy all royals. I think that's what he just said.
No, I just said I'm just not a royalist, and we don't have
You
kings and
have a
queens
guillotine in your
America.
backyard, and you're just waiting for the royalists to show up.
I'm not French either. So.
Yeah, let's make a distinction
Yes.
here.
On the topic of Princess Di's death, because of course, as I said, I was 3. It was nice to watch the show and get some context on the situation, especially about Dodi Fayed, who is a name I'd heard. And let me tell you, when someone just says that name and you don't get to see it and you don't know who the person is and all you hear is Dodi Fayed, you're like, is that a Dr. Seuss character? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but he was the son of a billionaire from Egypt and incredibly successful and helped create or produce, I guess, Chariots of Fire, which
Yeah. So Chariots of Fire.
Fantastic film.
It's one of my favorites of all time. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1981, which was depicted in the season. Was it season 6?
season 5.
Season 5, I thought so. And it was fascinating. I did not know that history, so that was kind of fascinating to see that the show dealt
Yeah,
with it.
he also helped produce the movie Hook, which not nearly as good as Chariots of Fire, but when I was 3 and 5, I loved Hook way more than Chariots of Fire. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So that backstory was interesting. I think, so getting to this show, The Crown, that's kind of what our topic is. I think it's probably been one of Netflix's more successful shows.
yeah, I think so.
And it, for a lot of different reasons, I think the topic itself is just going to be attractive to a lot of people. but the quality of the acting, and as you were saying, they got a lot of actors who very much looked the part.
The actors look close enough to the actual historical figure, but then the costuming and the camera angles and makeup and hair just really, there are times you're watching it and you forget this isn't the actual historical figure because they look exactly like all the pictures you've ever seen of that historical figure.
Especially when it's closer to, in the 90s, especially with the Princess Di and everything. I think that the actress they got for her...
Elizabeth Debicki, who is the one in seasons 5 and 6. And then before that, it was Emma Corrin.
Okay. I have actually seen her, I think Elizabeth Debicki, in another show. And you wouldn't even have recognized her as having acted.
That's what I was thinking about the actress who plays Camilla. She plays Mrs. Darling in the Peter Pan movie that came out in like 2005. And in that one, she's depicted as, the most beautiful mother that's ever lived. And then as Camilla, she's not ugly or anything, but it's a very different look. And it took me a few episodes to be like, oh my gosh, that's the same person.
Yeah.
So Olivia Williams is the actress's name.
Okay.
And she has a better look as Mrs. Darling than Camilla. I'll say that. So that's an interesting topic. My childhood, as I said, my mom loved Princess Di. So she was not a fan of Camilla. And I only really heard basically tabloid stuff about Camilla because that's really all that made it across the pond. So I had this view of Camilla as like a gremlin, basically.
Yeah.
Until The Crown started coming out and I started to really investigate who these people are and find out. It turns out Charles and Diana never had a great marriage. And in fact, Charles, apparently, if the show is correct, loved Camilla before he even knew Diana.
Yeah. I think that's pretty well established, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that they've made the show, and of course the people are still living their lives, and it's coming up very close to the actual current time.
Right.
And the living memory is fresh in many ways, and it's kind of like a whole nother layer to what has already been like a voyeuristic kind of experience in life of these people.
Right. And of course, the news that we've just had in the past couple of days about King Charles going in for surgery.
Oh my gosh.
And Kate Middleton having some abdominal surgery. And it's just like, it's very strange to hear, King Charles is going in for surgery on his prostate.
Sure.
Like, did I need to know that? I don't think I did.
Yeah, it's like, in so many ways, it's as though they are highly respected and loved zoo animals, and they're kept in so many ways. But, throughout, probably the last 80 plus years, it's been, or at least it's been very much the British people in the world know everything about them.
Right, especially since the TV, basically.
Yes. But now this show is like taking a microscope to their lives. And I can't imagine what that might do to a person, even if you've grown up and know this is your duty or this is your life or this is how it is. Mm-hmm. But what does that do when your life is under such intense scrutiny?
And where something that you and your family managed with difficulty to get past 15 years ago is suddenly headline news again because the TV show covered it.
Ugh. Yeah. That's got to be brutal. I would be curious to know if, what they really think about all this.
Yeah. I've heard Harry in a few interviews talk about it, and he's, of course, they're always, when you do hear an actual interview from one of the royals, they're always quite restrained in the things they say because, of course, they're under a microscope. So they never say terrible things, but they do, like, I think Harry was saying, he appreciated that his mom, Princess Diana, who he apparently hero worships, which is natural, he appreciated that she was treated respectfully. And I think that is something about it. As you said, they're well-respected zoo animals, and they are kind of treated as zoo animals. But despite that, the show does a good job of respecting these people. They're people, they're not characters. So even when the narrative kind of the plot of the TV show has to make someone a bad guy, they don't make them evil. It's just they were kind of forced to have to take this position because of all these pressures that you're shown. And, they're still family, so they don't hate each other. They're just like, I can't say yes to this, even though you really, really want me to, and you're my son or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think the focus of the entire series is obviously Elizabeth. And, season 6 ends kind of hinting at this is probably the last season.
They marketed it as the last season, apparently.
Yeah, so
which I didn't realize.
It did. The last episode did feel like it was the end of it.
Well, like I said, it's gotten so close to where they are in current time.
Right.
I understand that, yeah, you've kind of caught up and you don't really want to tick them off too much by depicting things that happened last year. But man, if you're the kind of person who celebrates and makes money off of this kind of thing, how do you resist Harry and his whole debacle with his marriage?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think that going into this, you have the longest living monarch in ever.
She beat Victoria, I think, but she's not ever, because there was some king of France, one of the Louis, who inherited it like 16 and then lived like 94.
Okay.
And she was like 25 when she inherited it.
So second longest.
Yeah.
Let's say. But you also have the most famous royal family in the world.
Right.
The Windsors.
Yeah, the Windsors. And so her legacy, the legacy that it represents to England, to Britain, is significant. And I think this show was kind of like recognizing that. It was just another way to keep telling the story that I think the British have been telling themselves for a long time. You know, the tabloids and everything. I mean, part of the reason they exist is the royal family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how much money does a royal family make for the tabloids?
Right. And the show was talking about that with some of the photos of Di apparently selling for $200,000, just one photo.
So I'm speaking to the question of would they, we're getting close to the whole present drama, and the present drama surrounds Harry, obviously, and Meghan Markle, and how they basically don't want to have the royal duties, but still want to be royally, whatever. But they do have, I think what's fascinating is this is a Netflix show, and they have a deal with Netflix for their own show. But something tells me that probably Netflix, it's not going to keep, I think it would try to avoid.
It's just a documentary series called Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, I think the Netflix would probably try to, maybe not. Maybe they would say, hey, whatever, we're going to go ahead and go tell the story of, but I just don't see it right now. I think we're in this kind of like pause period where it's like we're still watching this current drama unravel with the royal family.
So maybe you wait 10 years.
So let's wait, and then we'll go delve back into this thing when we see.
Well,
how it ends up.
Yeah, season 6 does kind of end with Queen Elizabeth thinking about her own death.
You're right.
But since it's a show that begins with her inheriting the crown, basically, it seems to me that you don't end it until she dies and King Charles becomes king.
You'd think.
That's what I would think. So that's what I was surprised to find out this was supposed to be the last one.
Well, it still even may just be a matter of respect since her death was somewhat recent.
Yeah, past 2 years. But it is interesting. Earlier, one of you said something about Queen Elizabeth being this kind of revered figure, especially in England. And that's true. And even in my life, she's kind of had that position where Queen Elizabeth was kind of the touchstone of reality and proper action and what the West stands for.
Yeah, sort of the figurehead of the West.
Right. And especially the moment I felt that was that first big bout of COVID. I don't think this was Christmas. I think it was that first spring when COVID was happening and we were all locked down. And you really should say the lockdown's not COVID, because anyhow. She gave a speech saying, this is tough for everybody. This is scary, because this was still when we didn't quite know how dangerous COVID was going to be. And basically just saying, we're all in this together, stand together. And it was just a very touching speech that she gave to essentially the entire English-speaking world. And coming from her, the Queen, for 70 years, it felt meaningful to me.
Particularly, even if you don't see her as a person of authority, from a practical standpoint, you can almost in some ways see her as that wise grandmother who's been there. I mean, she was there for many of the great conflicts of the 20th century.
I think she was one of the last world leaders still in power who lived through World War II.
Yeah. And that's another living memory thing. Yeah. And just knowing that wisdom, and she's persevered through that, and of a person of principle and of stability. And maybe even more important than anything else is just the fact that this is a stable person.
Mm-hmm.
when there are very few of them in power.
And she was the head of the Church of England and took it very seriously, and by all accounts was a Christian.
Certainly.
A true believer, which I know that meant a lot to my mom because she, like I said, loves the royals, and so she loved Elizabeth as well. Not as much of a fan as Charles. We're all excited for William.
Indeed.
Well, Charles, they raised the question in the show because I think the question was being raised in the public, which was, is the royal family an asset or a burden to the British society?
They raised that several times.
Right. And I think I remember conversations happening about that around the death of Diana, because they were saying they were very critical of how the Queen responded. They felt that and to be fair, you can understand why the response was kind of the way it was. Like, what are the rules? I mean, of any monarch, Elizabeth was a rule follower.
Right.
Very much so. And not a rule follower just because it's the rules and I just do it by the rules, but it was almost like
she knew the weight of the responsibility she carried.
She understood that you have to elevate the position over the person, because if you don't, you threaten the whole thing.
And yeah, you threaten the whole thing. And every time she opened her mouth, she was, whether she liked it or not, speaking for the entire nation of the United Kingdom.
Now, it's interesting that Charles now is king, and he's, 70? How old is he?
I think he's in his 70s.
He's in his 70s, 72, I think, or 75.
75.
Okay, so he's probably not going to be long as a king. I mean, that's to start off as a king at 74.
Well, he's from a long-lived family. His dad lived into his 90s. His mom lived into her 90s, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but still, even if he lives,
his grandmother lived to like 101.
Even so, I mean, he's 20 years. Maybe he'll be king.
Right.
It's just not after what we just saw.
After 70 years, it's not very long.
And so it's got to be weird because he doesn't exude the same type of awe or reverence from the public that, he doesn't have the gravitas that Elizabeth had. And so it's just kind of, it's weird to see. And honestly, after watching The Crown and then seeing, Charles as king, it's not the same thing.
He's not lived the same life.
No,
right.
By any means.
But I do think it's fair, and the show kind of depicts this, that Elizabeth didn't really have the dignity and respect she had towards the end of her life when she'd only been queen for a year either. And you see that, and she gets some challenges and isn't always viewed as, the most responsible leader possible in the early show.
No, it's true. But she also didn't have the baggage that Charles has attached to him.
That's true. And she was a gorgeous 25-year-old where he's a old man.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, because I think the question people keep asking, as the show asked, is how long is this going to go? How long is the
monarchy going to go?
The monarchy, I mean, presumably it's going to continue. I mean, I think like you said, William looks like he's made out of the same stuff that his grandmother was. Mm-hmm. And so that I think there's a bright future for the monarchy because of that. And I think it seems like his relationship with Kate is very strong, and they seem
not plagued by the troubles that his parents
had. And although he's we talk about the current drama now with them, I don't know what the relationship between he and his brother is like, but it does seem like a pretty sore spot for that family right now.
So speaking of William, and you kind of already touched on it, but I'll just say it because it's one of the things we had written down to talk about. What if Charles was the last king? What if there's no more kings or queens after Charles in England? That's a wildly different world than the one we've been living in.
It really is. As an American, I love to say that I don't care about the crown, but as a man of the West, I have to say that would be, I think, a bit of a blow to our identity as a world culture.
Right, and as English speakers as well.
Sure.
I think it would be like a fall of the Soviet Union moment if you were a Soviet yourself. If the monarchy ended and England turned into just a constitutional republic like us or whatever.
Maybe. It's strange, though, because the monarchy doesn't, I mean, it's a figurehead, not a power. And so...
Well, I think what they represent in many ways now is a touchstone of principle.
I would say...
Moral principle.
Maybe.
Well, that's kind of what they've become. They weren't always that way.
Right.
Well, of course not, but that's kind of what they're supposed to be.
I would say less that way. I think that they're more of a touchstone of an old culture.
Yeah, they're kind of a living monument.
Right.
That, like, you look at Charles and you're like, this is the more or less direct heir, but definitely blood-related descendant of William the Conqueror. Like, this dynasty goes back 1,000 years and more. Not too much more, because I guess there were other kings before William came in, but at least to Normandy.
Sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're a very active family as far as in the world philanthropic,
Right.
scene. I mean, it's almost like that's the point of the royalty now, is to represent England philanthropically to the rest of the world. So they go and they, visit all these countries and former parts of the empire, and they advocate for various causes like clean water, or I think
landmines is something Dye does in the show.
There was that. I think they've kind of waded into the whole climate stuff.
That's always been a big thing for Charles.
Right, which is unfortunate. But they're kind of, right now, you have the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland. They're effectively, you could say in one sense, these are all the kind of nobility of the world getting together every year.
Right. The functional nobility, if not title nobility.
Right. And so here you have you could say that the monarchy, English monarchy has been able, I keep saying English. It's more than English. British monarchy has been able to kind of transition away from just being a political power in the old sense and being an influencer within the greater world economic system.
And I will point out, technically, they do still actually have political power, and more than technically, in reality, I'm sure as well. But like, I think Charles still technically has the right to dissolve Parliament. Like, he would not get away with it if he tried,
right.
But the law says he can do it.
There are some questions of what would happen if they were to, the nuclear option, what would happen. But yeah, you're right. I think what we got to see with Elizabeth was she was very careful not to put her thumbs on the scale of politics. Very careful. Will we see that continue? I don't know. Yeah,
Charles hasn't rocked the boat much yet.
I think he definitely wanted to when he was younger. I think the show kind of does a good job of kind of hitting at that. Charles is very much saying, we need to modernize. And you could credit Charles with saying he did influence his mother in some ways in kind of looking, hey, we can't just keep doing things or expect people to see us the same way they've always seen us.
Yeah.
So Charles seems to have always been, I guess you could say he was a kid of the 60s, right?
I guess so. It would have been 12 in 1960.
Yeah, so he was kind of this new generation wanting to throw off the old in a lot of ways.
An awakening generation.
Yeah. That's got to be quite the quandary to find yourself in, the heir of the oldest surviving dynasty and also wanting to throw off old stuff.
Yeah.
Like, hang on, I'm the old stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when Diana died, not long after she died, and maybe it was more around the talk about Charles and Camilla, and maybe it was prior to them getting married. But there was a lot of talk of maybe somehow the crown entirely skipping Charles and just going right to William.
There was a lot of talk of that, and that maybe Elizabeth would do that, and of course that did not happen. But everyone thought, pretty much right up until she died, she might say, nah, it's going to be William, it's not going to be Charles, which would be horrible. If you're Charles, to live your whole life in the shadow of the crown and being like, I'm going to be the king when my mom dies. So like, I want to be king. I don't really want my mom to die.
Would that be pretty unprecedented though for a monarch to do that?
And nothing's unprecedented when it comes to monarchs, but it would be unprecedented for the British monarchy.
Well,
yeah,
that's what I meant.
I would find it really unusual.
I just mean, if you study the history of how one person becomes king after another, even in England at different times, no one plays as dirty as people trying to become king ever.
But I don't know of any time in history where they skipped right to the grandson.
Not if the son was living, I don't
Correct.
think.
I mean, if I'm wrong in the comments.
I'm sure it's happened sometimes.
Well, what kind of is that an authority solely given the monarch? The monarch can determine the next in line?
Not really, because it was always going to be up until they changed the rules during Elizabeth's reign.
Right.
You couldn't choose your daughter to inherit if you had a son. The son would have to inherit.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of constraints on being king, apparently.
I'm just wondering how much did she have unilateral power to say, it's not going to be you, Charles, it's going to be you, William?
I would say no, not unilateral. But I think if you're the king or queen and the people support the idea, you have the power to do it. But it's only because you have the support of the people. That's my take. But of course, no one put that to the test, so we'll never know. At least not yet. All right. We've gone pretty far. We haven't talked too much about the show, so let's not try to divert back to covering the whole show. But I will just talk about in season 6, they also talk about William meeting Kate Middleton.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at the timeline of this, and I was like, because I have some thoughts on this. But they met in like 2001, started dating in 2002, and then they didn't get engaged until 2010. And then after they got engaged, it was like 6 months and they were married, which apparently that's 6 months seems like a normal engagement period. And you can put together a whole royal wedding during that period. I mean, good job, because royal weddings are a little bit more extravagant.
Yeah, it's like a national event.
A global event,
Yeah.
I think. I remember my mom watching it when it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not watch
Everyone dissecting what every distant cousin's hat was, and it's such a terrible hat, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I recall.
But yeah, my thing is, generally, I don't think there's any reason to date someone for almost a decade before deciding if you want to marry them.
Generally.
However,
if you're a regular person.
However, I will say, if I was the heir to one of the longest surviving dynasties in the world and also going to become King of England one day, I'd probably take my time and make absolutely certain they're the person too. So yeah. I can't really blame him on that.
Well, I mean, let's look at the disaster that his father lived through.
Right.
Sure. He had a lot of examples to be like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So potentially, who knows? Obviously, we don't know all that goes into these people's lives, even though they are constantly being followed and constantly being reported on and everything.
Yeah, probably lots of what we know is just speculation.
Yeah, I mean, they do have private lives.
Yeah. All right. I have a couple of questions to kind of wrap us up with. So first, of the British monarchy, and snarky answers are acceptable, I guess, who's your favorite royal that lived while you were living?
Well, Prince, of course. It's Purple Album. He's not British, but he is royal.
I was David Bowie.
He's no longer with us.
Yeah. All right. So Prince, fine.
Actually, William, probably.
William. Okay. All right. Thomas.
Meghan
Markle.
She's going to bring down the whole house.
I will say.
She's trying to.
I will say of the royals that have been alive when I'm alive, I gotta say I think Meghan's probably prettiest. So I'll give her that one. I don't know if I'll give her
like the
favorite.
least British.
She's a wrecking ball. That's how she comes across to me. I'm being facetious when I say she's my favorite royal. Is she royal?
I don't think she is at this time. She might still have a title of Duchess.
Was she a Duchess?
She was briefly,
but it was kind of like rescinded.
I think so. She may still have it honorarily or something.
Who knows? All I know is
too complicated for us Americans.
She's made money off of being associated with the family.
I think she's achieved a lot of what she wanted to achieve by marrying Harry. That seems.
I think
self-elevation, spotlight,
maybe
attention,
we're being
money.
overly harsh.
Well, I think I mean, I think Harry.
She doesn't let him go hunting anymore. We can be harsh.
Harry has demonstrated that I don't think he deserves to be king.
Well, good thing he was never really gonna be king.
Yeah.
So no, I think probably it's either Elizabeth or William in my lifetime. The movie, I think it was Naked Gun or Naked Gun 2.5, one of those Leslie Nielsen movies. But he would. I don't know. Have you ever seen any of his movies?
I've seen Leslie Nielsen movies, but not Naked Gun.
Okay, well, there's a scene where the Queen Elizabeth, supposed to be Queen Elizabeth in it, and he has a lot of fun at her expense.
Oh, I think I have seen that scene.
Anyway, I think I probably would say William. He seems like he's a pretty good dude and
responsible.
This 6th season does spend a half of it, at least, is very much focused on him in rising, kind of his.
And what was the term, William Mania or something like that, when he visited America?
Yeah.
Because it turns out single, handsome young princes are popular with girls. Who knew?
Yep.
And no storybook ever influenced that.
No.
And rock stars, right?
Yeah.
So I think he, like I said earlier, he's most like his grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
They really kind of leaned into that in the show. He seems to be the one who's actually really taken seriously, you could say, the responsibility of being.
And the duties. Like, there's all these things.
Right.
Someone has to appear and be royal at an event. And it seems like when he does that, he does it well.
And I will say about the Crown, it made you appreciate the fact that, yes, these people are very privileged, obviously, but it also very much showed that it comes with a ton of responsibilities, duties, work, however you want to put it. They're not just like, hey, I can do whatever I want. Woohoo. It's
right. I don't know if I would trade places with any of them.
Yeah.
Maybe with the one played by Charles Dance in like season 4 who wanted to overthrow Parliament and become like a true king. You know, I could get with that if I could actually have control over the military and tell my forces go conquer. You know, that sounds fun. But
I mean, you really see it as they have to develop these skills to hobnob, you know, these aristocrats and everybody, plus try to connect with the common man, plus have all these causes they're supposed to be dealing with. You know, it is a job. Put it that way.
For sure.
It's not just, hey, I'm rich and I can do whatever I want. In fact,
and privacy is not a thing that exists in
right. I think you do lose. I mean, for Harry and for William, I mean, they never really knew what it was like to be like you and me, who grow up and nobody know who we are and not care. I think that that's just something that they probably, you can understand to some degree why the psychology of some of these royals are the way they are.
It could drive you nuts.
Yeah.
Being a royal, but not the king or queen.
And honestly, I know we were just trashing Meghan, but I don't know that Meghan really appreciated just how challenging that can be. Even though she was a movie star before she married Harry, I think that she was probably really caught off guard with just how different realm she was
how
many rules, how many, things she's required to do. I mean, I think that just...
We've been saying how much we love Elizabeth, but I mean, really, if you're Meghan, no one has ever had a more overbearing mother-in-law.
True.
Yes.
Or I guess grandmother-in-law, but still.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, good on them for being as decent of people as they are under the circumstances. I mean, I would not want this.
Yeah. Since y'all both said William, who I do also like a lot, I think we all agree it's William or it's Elizabeth. I'll say it's Elizabeth is my favorite. And I'll share a quick story. When she visited the church that George Washington went to in Williamsburg, I think.
Burton Parish.
Yeah. At least when I was giving the tour, I was told this story of that church, that she was offered this very nice seat where, I guess royalty had sat before or something. And she was like, is this where George Washington sat? And the guy was like, no, he sat over there. And she said, I think I'll sit where George sat. Thanks. And so like just the respect and like, if I can sit where George Washington sat, I'm going to sit there.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Classy.
Yeah. All right. Final question. If you had to vote, if we in America had to elect a king or queen, who has your vote? It cannot be a politician.
Wow. If we had to elect, and so is this an all-powerful monarch?
Whatever form of monarch you're willing to vote for.
Yeah, I mean, maybe let's make it easier and say it would be like the British monarchy.
Okay, just like the British monarchy today.
Yeah.
Okay. General Mattis.
Mad Dog?
Mad Dog Mattis. Not really, but that is kind of awesome.
I don't know who I'd pick, so I'm putting you on the spot here, but we can brainstorm maybe,
Or Elon Musk.
Elon Musk? He was born in South Africa. Thomas, who are you going to vote for to be king?
I'm trying to think. I mean, you're thinking of somebody who's famous, right?
It doesn't have to be, but you would assume
it doesn't have to be. But in order for this, I couldn't just say like Joe Schmo and everybody be like, oh yeah, he would be great because nobody knows. But I would want to try to steer away from actors because
not the most stable.
Right. Although there's some great actors out there, but that's you tend to either think sports stars, some celebrity actor or something, or some business tycoon, and it's like it's almost like
I'll open it up. I'll say you can choose a
those.
politician if you want, but they can't hold their current political position.
I think the problem with the politician is they're already seeking power.
Yeah, that's true.
Dan Crenshaw.
Dan Crenshaw. There you go. I vote for myself, and I hope you will too, or else I will behead you.
Yeah, clearly.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's a silly question. I don't actually know who I would pick if I had to pick an American. Elon Musk, you could do worse. You could do a lot better, I think, but you could do worse.
Oh, yeah. You could do a lot better.
Well, as it turns out, I am a royal descendant. I'm descended from King James I think 6th was the one who became King of England, so I'm descended from King James the 4th, who was only King of Scotland. So, there you go. I qualify. Vote for me. I'll be king. All right.
So, I have no answer, sorry.
No answer. You wouldn't vote for me?
No.
How dare you? Off with his head.
That's why.
Indeed.
Who wouldn't immediately start chopping some heads off if they got elected king or queen?
And that's why you should never be king. Yeah.
All right. We're brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's right. It's free. Be sure to like and subscribe. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.